There is a slight difference between the poem you see in paper 2 and the poem you see in paper 1. In paper 2, we looked at the poem under oral skills. And that's why you find questions of how you would perform the poem. How do you say? Sound devices, rhyme and rhyme scheme. So most of the time, the paper 1 poem is usually on performance. But the paper 2 one is more revolves around content. Around the content, the material. Just like the oral narrative questions, you are likely to find more questions on the poem revolve around content. So you'll find questions on economic activities of the community, like just the narrative, political activities, socio-economic, social activities also. You will find questions now in this one, you will find questions that are asking you about the subject of the poem. What is this poem talking about? That's a question you are likely to find. Who is the persona? This is a very important question you're likely to find in the poem. If a poem is there, the persona question is almost always going to be there. Who is the persona? The persona is, Madam Winnie, may supply us with an answer.
The persona is the voice speaking in the poem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The voice speaking. So you have been given a poem, and the poem has been written by William Shakespeare, for example. William Shakespeare is not the persona. William Shakespeare is just the poet. But who is speaking? And again, just like all these other areas we've talked about, is comprehension. There is evidence picked. So who is speaking? A child. Why do you say a child is speaking? You can highlight. She calls to her mother, etc., etc. Who is speaking in the poem? A young man in love. And then you give evidence. The voice of the person speaking. It doesn't matter the poet who's written the poem, but the voice speaking. That's the persona. That's a question that is very likely to be there. Another question you might find is, who is being addressed? The poems have different types of... The poem might have an address to a direct person. You'll find that the poem is this person is speaking directly to their mother. So you can actually see who is being spoken to. At other times, you can actually see the poem talking to the poet or the persona talking to the audience. You must be able to discern that and identify keywords from the poem that actually show that the audience is the person being spoken to. Some more information, Mr. Matanda?
Yeah, exactly. As we are talking about identifying issues with the poems in paper 2, we are talking about the subject matter. You need to understand, just like we have mentioned, like comprehension questions, like the narrative. Here you need to read the poem, understand the poem, and respond to questions. Just to clarify, on issues dealing with sound patterns, we had alliterations, assonance, and all those things in paper 1 poetry. In this case, the sound patterns here, we eliminate the rhyme and rhyme scheme, because you'll not find the rhyme and rhyme scheme here to be asked as the sound patterns. So, and just to mention in terms of maybe alliteration, you find that a word is repeated in a line. So this does not give you alliteration because it's the same word. And therefore you can even talk about repetition, but not alliteration in that case. So alliteration, it has to be different words. Then that's first sound in that word. That's what will give you alliteration.
Okay, maybe I can comment about the type of the poem. We have some poems that are literal. That means they are straightforward. They don't have any hidden meaning. Then we have some poems that are symbolic. They appear to have a deeper sense. So the learner should be able to tell the moment they come across the poem, if they find something that appears to be not quite so clear, then there could be an indication that there is a deeper meaning to the poem. So they should be able to tell the difference between the two.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So the understanding Comprehension, and that's why this paper is called comprehension. There is a lot of comprehension, understanding required for you to comprehensively answer the questions.
Exactly.
Just an addition, or maybe just not an addition, but basically accentuating what Mr. Matanda said about alliteration. We can also talk about consonants and assonance. We cannot talk about those sound devices appearing in the same word. So, for example, the sentence has plan to come and plan to fail, for example, in the same sentence. You cannot say that the P in plan is the same, is alliterated because it's repeated. You can also not say the A sound in the plan is also assonance. Because so whenever a word is repeated, do not consider any of these sound devices. The words have to be very clear. Plan, paid, there's alliteration, the pa sound, clear, because those are two different words. So you need to differentiate that. I think the other thing about poetry that that's probably students need to understand is that these poems are usually translated. Remember, we are talking about this section is oral narrative. It's basically from the oral narrative and songs that we get. So you might find questions on what could have been lost when this song was translated. There is a likelihood of finding those kind of questions because there is an aspect of these questions could have, or these poems could have been brought from the local language, whichever it is, and then translated into English. Expect those kind of questions at one time or the other. Another question that is very confusing and students have a problem handling and is a likely one to appear is questions on attitude.
May I add something to this translation aspect? How can learners be able to tell what is lost when an item or when a poem is translated? There are those aspects of probably alliteration and tongue twisting that exist in the
Original.
in the original language. So when it is translated, then that is lost. So maybe that is a guiding point.
And maybe to add on to that, there is an aspect that Mr. Matanda said that we don't look at rhyme and rhyme scheme in this poem, and it's because probably these aspects got lost in translation. Not because they were not there, but because when we translated, the words that came in place replaced or destroyed that aspect. So we lose those aspects. The originality also, the authenticity, those are some of the things that are lost in translation. So those are questions you might find, and that's how you would approach them. So you can mention that there is a loss of styles like alliteration, assonance, rhyme and rhythm, all that. So the other question that is also very common in poetry is a question that revolves around the attitude, the mood, and it's attitude, there's mood, and the tone. And those three are related. So you might get a question asking you, what is the attitude of the persona? This question is asking you basically, what are the feelings? What does the persona feel about the subject? And I'll go back a bit and just give a few pointers about understanding a poem, and hopefully it helps get some of these questions right. When you get a poem, I always advise my students to do. One is to ask themselves, what is the poem talking about? Question one, what is the poem talking about? Two, who is speaking in the poem? And three, who is being spoken to? Those three questions help us understand the poem in depth. Now, if we go back to the question on the persona and the tone or the attitude, when you ask yourself the question, what is the poem speaking about? That is the subject. So, what is the attitude of the persona? It is asking you, what are the feelings of this person speaking as regards the subject matter? So you need to supply, again, an adjective. How do they feel? angry, remorseful, and then give evidence from the poem that shows exactly that. Attitude, feelings. The tone is how the speaker, the persona, remember the three questions: subject matter, persona, and the person spoken to. The tone of the persona, how are they speaking? Because of the way they are feeling, there is a way they are expressing their feelings. If you're happy, if I say, for example, I'll use words like, come here. If I use those words exactly that way, there is an inflection. If I say, come here, same words, there is a feeling. There is a feeling I have, and I'm expressing it in my words. So that is my tone. So how is it? This person is feeling angry. And because of feeling angry, how is he expressing his feelings? That's the tone. And then lastly, we have the mood or the atmosphere. The persona has his feelings, and because of the way he's feeling, he's expressed it in the tone. And after expressing it in the tone, now as the audience, there is what we feel. That is the mood. That is the atmosphere. What with all those words that have been shared and the feelings of the persona have been shared and brought out in the tone that he has used, what is created? What do we feel?
Then we also talked about the subject matter. Then in this case, you are going to look at the thematic concerns. What theme is there in that poem that will give you the subject matter, so that it guides you on how you can express the attitude, the tone, and that mood of the poem?
Yes, so that is, in a nutshell, how to handle the poem and the oral narrative. And there is more information contained in the Climax publishers' books. You can look for them, and you can actually find a very detailed account, a breakdown of the different questions and the different papers. So